Okay, well, hello, welcome to ISCO UK Meetup hands-on series. So these sessions are brought to you by ISCO UK, which is a UK chapter of International Society for Knowledge Organization. We're a membership organization. Our website, iscouk.org, holds the repository of all previous ISCO events, but also you'll find details of the membership benefits and how to join there. You'll also find the schedule of upcoming meetups and some other relevant seminars and conferences. So to get a couple of logistics points out of the way, so during most of this workshop, your mics will be muted. We do have a couple of Q&A slots throughout the session, but please do post your questions into the chat box and into the Q&A section of Zoom. So the session will be recorded and you'll be able to listen to it via ISCO UK website later, and we'll also distribute a questionnaire after the meetup. So it will be really great if you provide some feedback there or in ISCO UK meetup comments section. Also, if you would like to present at ISCO UK meetups, please do let us know. It's really for everyone: practitioners, students, and researchers, anyone in the knowledge organization field or in the related areas such as data governance and management. So I guess let's kick off. So really the goal for these hands-on meetups within ISCO UK is to build a community of people within ISCO, but also beyond ISCO, who are aware of, understand, keen on using open source tools for knowledge organization and related fields. Again, data governance and management are sort of close to my heart, so to speak. And the landscape is actually quite diverse. So some of the tools that we were looking into in the past couple of years, certainly around taxonomy management, publication, some of the subject indexing, some of the document management, hoping to explore that in a bit more details throughout the year with these hands-on sessions. But today we're starting with VocBench, which is free and open source web application to build ontologies, knowledge organization systems, lexicons, using web standards such as OWL, SCOS, and OntoLex. So as a bit of a background, back in December 2020, Phil and I ran a workshop on VocBench, and really sort of dived at the deep end, so to speak, and now taking some of the learnings, really sort of taking a step back, providing a bit of an introduction, and giving an easier access to VocBench, so you don't have to sort of work through the setup. Rather, there is an instance for you that is available. So really, the goal for this series, for the VocBench series, is well, I guess our promise to you, so to speak, that by the end of this workshop, you'll be familiar with the features of VocBench and you'll have some hands-on experience with it. And the way we're going to do it is with 3 different hands-on sessions. One is today, which is Introduction to VocBench. In May, we'll run VocBench data import session, talk about that, and then in June we'll talk about versioning and date catalog features, which is quite exciting. So I guess with that, let me just introduce who's here, who's going to talk, and in what sequence we sort of go. So it's great to have Armando Stellato with us. He's currently leading VocBench 3 project. The project was funded by the ISO 2 program of the EU, and Armando is also assistant professor in the University of Rome, Tor Vergata, where he's carrying on research and teaching in the fields of knowledge representation and knowledge-based systems. Armando also did some work with Food and Agriculture Organization, looking at all the aspects of their maintenance and publication of the RDF vocabularies, and also obviously working on VocBench. So Armando will talk about sort of VocBench basics, and then we'll also have Phil Stacey with us, who's with Barrett Holmes, and he's working on implementation of the document management and been with the industry for, I guess, quarter of a century, looking into information management. He helps organize ISCO UK web meetups. And here he'll sort of take over from Armando and talk about, run through some of the hands-on aspects of VocBench. And so while obviously they're talking, I'll be busy distributing usernames and passwords to our instance. So my name is Eugene Morozov. I'm a technology consultant. I'm very much interested in using linked data for all aspects of data governance and data management, but also risk management and regulatory compliance, mostly within financial services. I run Semantic Web London meetup, and I also help with ISCO UK meetup, help Phil and others. There's quite a bit of a group. So I think with that, I'll hand it over to Armando to talk about VocBench.
Thank you so much, Eugene, for the great introduction, and thank you, Phil, and everybody at ISCO for inviting me. And this is a nice opportunity to talk about VocBench. I'm sharing the screen now to give my presentation, and just have to understand which is the screen. Oh, this is true. Okay. So I guess you all see the screen now. Okay.
Yep, coming through.
So, but first, a quick outline. We will introduce just a couple of slides for introducing the development team and give a faster than life VocBench history. One of the questions that people ask me is, so is it version 9 that has been released? So why VocBench 3? Is it 3.9 or what? And so it's better to clear out what the 3 stands for in VocBench name. And so then we pass to the architectural requirements that led to the development of the system. This is the first of the various workshops that will be held at ISCO. And so we think that it's good to introduce the platform in general before you have some hands-on. And then we will move to talk about the features, just a few slides about the core features and extension points. There will be more ground to speak about more advanced features in the future, in future workshops. So a quick word about our research lab. I work at the University of Tor Vergata, as Eugene introduced me, and it's the second university that has been built in Rome. It's like a campus. It's a distributed campus that is in the southeast part of Rome. It's a very enjoyable place. I come from the Department of Engineering. In particular, I teach computer science. This is the VocBench team. Mainly, there are other collaborators working at the platform, but mainly this is the core team, with me leading the development, and then Andrea Turbati, Manuel Fiorelli, and Tiziano Lorenzetti, that are, like say, the lead developing team. The VocBench comes under a contract that is signed with the European Commission and is managed by the EU Law and Publication Office under a contract with the company in Europe. This is not a list of the users of VocBench. This is by far not an exhaustive list, but this is a list of people who participate, a list of organizations who sent their people to attend the first workshop that was held it was a stakeholders meeting for developing a list of the main requirements for the platform. So we could say that really VocBench is a community-driven platform, in that all of its main features come from below, come from the users and their needs and what they asked for to be developed into the system. This list has been already completed in the first 2 years of development, but even the other years that followed, now we are at the 5th year, just followed from suggestions that came from both these important stakeholders and the community, because there is an open community group that you can subscribe to. You can ask questions, ask for information about, it can be trivially some information on how to use something in VocBench, but it can also be a place where to suggest new features. This is a faster than light VocBench history, just one slide. It started quite a few time ago in a NEON project. NEON project was an IP project of the sixth European framework. It was a research project, and there was one of the partners, that was FAO, that actually was a user. It was not a developer partner, a developing partner, but they had very specific requirements that couldn't be satisfied by the main platform that was being developed there. That was a collaborative system for the development of network ontologies. So they had clear requirements about something for developing thesauri. Multilinguality was a must, and collaboration as well. So they started with something that was modeled around their AgriVoc thesaurus. AgriVoc is a very important thesaurus in the agricultural domain. It's one of the main three important agricultural thesauri in the world. And it's maintained by FAO, but there are a lot of collaborators working everywhere in the world. So collaboration is really a must, and multilinguality, because AgriVoc is today distributed in more than 30 languages. They had some requirements about this, and they started to develop their own platform. But later on, they discovered that there were obviously some, I mean, it was a first attempt. They were just starting to explore RDF technologies. RDF technologies, I wouldn't say they were in their infancy, but still they were not mature as they are now. And in 2000, I think it was 2009 or something later, there was a meeting. I was starting to work with them at the time, where I jumped in when the VocBench project was already started. And at the time, it was not called VocBench. And they decided to, since there was a lot of interest from other groups in FAO and other organizations, they decided to go ahead and go for a general purpose platform, but it was not just tailored around their AgriVoc thesaurus. So we put together two systems. There was one system that we were developing in my university. It was developed in a project for semantic annotation. It was the UI was embedded in the Firefox web browser, but there was a separate server that was providing, I mean, yes, semantic annotations services, but also in general, any kind of service that is related to knowledge management in RDF. So we decided to put together the two things and to release in just 6 months something that could be used in FAO by also other departments for other thesauri. So in this collaboration, we got with what was called at the time VocBench 2. And you can see the turkey coming behind. The turkey is the symbol of our platform developed at Tor Vergata, that is Semantic Turkey, and it's a system for knowledge management in RDF. Okay, the more you eat, the more you get hungry, and there was now VocBench 2 met quite some interest from several organizations. Now it was definitely something that was out of FAO. It was not just some other groups within the organization, but it was more organizations interested into the platform. In particular, the publication office manifested their interest in switching to VocBench for managing their thesauri. More requirements were coming, and soon enough, it became clear that that kind of Frankenstein that we realized was too a narrow choice, and it was just something developed very quickly for coming up with something to cover that hole that we were feeling. But we needed to do something very well from scratch. So this is the story of how VocBench 3 was born. It is now funded by the ISA Square program of the European Commission. And in a sense, we could say that it's Semantic Turkey on steroids. It has been developed from scratch in the sense that we started from there, but we did a lot of reworking. And in particular, all the user interface, which in the past was coming from the original VocBench platform of FAO, has been rewritten from scratch. The system now, also the part related to collaboration and many other aspects were from the original VocBench, while now we simply expanded the possibility of Semantic Turkey to also include this possibility. So this is VocBench 3. And there were a long list of requirements. This is a list of very general topics, such as multilingualism, controlled collaboration, data interoperability and consistency. So the possibility also to do on-the-fly constant checking, to provide different solutions for supporting alignment and mass integrity and checking and fixing. Software interoperability and extensibility, data scalability, and under the hood data access modification. We wanted to have support for Sparkle, obviously. I mean, now it would be a must. And also better editing access for users with high authorizations. The idea is that if you are a simple user, maybe like somebody who is naive about RDF, but is a domain expert, or you are a lexicographer or a terminologist, you want to be able to do your things without thinking too much about the complication of the underlying models. You just want to know, to add what you know, and to forget about the rest. At the same time, if you are an administrator, maybe you want to, or a project manager, not somebody who is really the most important and the most powerful user within a project, you might want to check every single detail of your data. So it should be adaptive with respect to different users, and this is also holds true for the installation, something that can be installed very easily if you want to manage it as a kind of desktop tool, but at the same time should allow for more complex installations where you can set up a web application with taking into account security, etc. RDF language support, VocBench, I think I can dare to say that is the only collaborative platform that has a full support for OWL, SCOS, SCOS Excel, OntoLex, and EDOAL as a standard for alignments, SCOS Excel for reified labels for Thesaura in SCOS, and so on. So when I say support, obviously, if you have an RDF editor, you can edit anything, because in the end, all these languages are based on RDF. But the point is the difference between just plainly editing RDF, that is editing triples, and have a convenient editor for any of these models, is that you have specialized user interfaces and user experience in general that can deal with the specific objects which are defined in these models. So this is what I mean by what I mean when I say support for OWL, SCOS, etc. That if you are modeling a thesaurus, you immediately want your tool to recognize that you have a tree, a hierarchy that is organized around the properties broader and narrower. You want to recognize that these are concepts, that there are collections of concepts which are special kind of resources, and so on. And you get special user interface which take into account the semantics of these elements. Maintainability. We didn't want a system that, yeah, it's perfect the way that it's delivered, and then every time we have to add that feature, we say, oh my God, this clashes with this other feature, or we must take into account of this into developing this other one, etc. And the more the system become big, and the more it become clogged. Now we wanted something that was perfectly, with all the features perfectly interwoven, so that the system could be easily maintained. Full editing capabilities. I mentioned this before. We want the users that are more oriented toward domain expertise to be able to do just their things without forgetting about the RDF complications behind that. But we want also somebody who is able to check this information, to go and check any single triple, know which graph it is stored, etc., and do every sort of change in detail. We want to take into account provenance. We want to know our information, where it comes from, where it is stored. We want to know if a user makes an action, which action has been made, when it has made, and by which user. So we adopted the provenance ontology vocabulary for these, and we also extended it for some specific information that are characteristic of VocBench. We provide support for versioning. There is an history mechanism in VocBench where all the actions that can be activated is optional, that all the actions are stored, and you can see the details of all the actions that have been performed along the time life of the life cycle of a data set. But at the same time, you can periodically store some snapshots of your repository in time, and those are kind of islands of the history of your data set that you can access every time and just switch in between them to see what are the changes that have been brought. There are metadata descriptions. VocBench actually fosters the creation and the utilizations of metadata. There is support for the following metadata vocabularies, but actually there is an extension point that allows users to also, developers, sorry, to add the extensions for developing new other metadata vocabularies. The metadata vocabularies can be used by applications to know immediately what are the characteristics of a certain data set before the data set is even queried. And VocBench itself makes use of this metadata. We will see how. Customizable UI. There is a mechanism called custom forms in which you can create the forms that will be presented to the user in order to satisfy specific needs. For example, you load the FAO ontology. You don't want every time to create a resource that represents a person, then select the property name and add the value for the property name, select the property last name and add the property, the value for last name, and so on. And this is doable. The interface is quite convenient, but it's so long. So maybe you want to have a specific form that is created only when an instance of person is created, fourth person is created, and you want to specifically add all the information that you think should be initialized when a new resource is created. And this is possible with the custom form feature. Also, everything is RDF. The past versions of VocBench had user database, actions database, etc., stored in a database. In this case, everything is RDF with the history of all the changes in the data sets. The data set itself, obviously, the list of users, everything is stored as RDF, or as properties within the system, but that can be later on translated immediately into RDF objects. A few words about the technological stack. We have the presentation layer that is written using the Angular Web Toolkit. Then we have Semantic Architect. Like I said before, Semantic Architect, the platform that we developed at Tor Vergata, is practically now the heart of VocBench and is the server that provides all the services. It exploits technologies such as Spring, AspectJ, and OSGI for dynamic inclusion of new services. Then there are specific triple store optimizations. VocBench is based on the middleware RDF for J, but obviously in connecting to some specific triple stores which are compliant with RDF for J, still it can use some of their specific functionalities that provide optimization. For example, the search. For example, GraphDB has its own which is a triple store compliant with VocBench, has its own way of storing indexes of all the resources that are within, especially the literal parts, that are within a data set or retrieving them. So in this case, there are special queries that can be used in Sparkle to activate this indexing, and these are exploited by VocBench when the connected triple store is GraphDB. This is the architecture. I don't go now into the details of that, but just to show the typical three-tier architecture. So the user interface, the business logic, and the middle layer, and then the data layer with the connection to the triple store. Another important part is on the right, because you see that every part can be extended. In particular, Angular is not really keen for extensions, but at least we included the possibility to dynamically create some user interfaces for some aspects, for example, configuration of plugins or configuration of the showing of configurations for many settings based on a general framework that can automatically produce the user interface. We hope to be able to see extensions in the future. I mean, completely rewritten user interfaces and added to the system in Angular, but for the moment this is not possible. So this was our way. Actually, it's the server to drive the creation of new user interfaces where it is possible to apply this. Then we have, like I said before, for the middle layer, we are using the OSGI extension mechanism, and there are several extension points in the platform. That is, an extension point is a well-known functionality that can be implemented in different ways. For example, we have a functionality for collaboration where you can connect VocBench to collaboration systems such as Jira or FreeCamp, or more can be added. And we provide some implementation, but it is possible for interested developers to develop new ones without having to touch the code of the original system. It is possible to independently work on a plugin and connect it to the system. And then the persistence layer, where, like I said before, it is possible to connect to triple stores which are compliant with the RDF4J architecture. And for each triple store, it is possible to write specific connectors. VocBench is mainly available as a standalone web application or as a Docker distribution. I suggest for people who are not familiar with Docker to just go with a standalone web application, because it's very easy. You just need to download Java. It must be Java 8, and then you don't need anything else. You just download VocBench, you click on start, and it starts. Actually, it's Carf, the name of the shell, the shell script, but this is not important. Anyway, it's just a click on start, and it goes. And if you want to go ahead and try bigger data sets, you might need a separate triple store. In that case, you might download RDF4J or GraphDB, start it, and have VocBench connect to it. That's all. You don't need to do anything else. So a quick word about the features. So we have this user interface. Like I said before, now we have a central point in VocBench in which we show everything about the user. This is actually more pages that should be scrolled that are shown all in a single screen. This is what we call the resource view. The resource view is the center of information about every resource. It follows some patterns, but these patterns are also rearranged depending on the kind of resource that is being loaded. So the general formula is the same for every resource, but then you have specific configurations for, let's say, our classes, for individuals, for all the cost concepts, cost collections, cost schemes, and so on. So every single resource might have a template that is started for better representing the properties that mostly characterize that kind of resource. And then there is always a general properties section that it applies to any kind of resource. So this is a broader view of the user interface. You can see on the left, this is the view of a thesaurus. So here you have the concept tree, that is the hierarchy of concepts in the thesaurus. You can see other tabs, for example, for seeing the schemes, that is the concept schemes, SCOS collections, and then class and properties, which come from the whole vocabulary and are also used in SCOS. Then here you have the resource view that I mentioned before. You can see here an important part is the lexicalization part, in which you can see all the various lexicalizations. In this case, the property tells us that the SCOS Excel vocabulary is being used. As you know, SCOS Excel labels are actually resources themselves, which are their own URI. But the lexicalization section always makes sure that the user from a resource see directly what is practically the label. In this case, is for those who are familiar with SCOS Excel, this is the value of the literal form of property that is attached to the URI representing the preferred label. One thing about the flags, I know that many people say flags are cool, but others say no, they are not reflecting really the language, they are reflecting the country. So we didn't decide to take a stance. We just say, okay, you can configure the system and use flags or lang codes as you prefer. There is this multilingual editing and visualization. You can choose which are which are the languages that you want to use for representing your resources in the various parts of the interface. I mean, here you have all the lexicalizations describing a given resource. But when you see that resource, you might choose to have just one language or a few languages for describing the resource. In this case, for example, I selected English and Italian. So every resource is always shown with its label in English and in Italian. And then you have here the language preferences. So here you can choose to show flags or not. You can choose in the class tree to show the instance numbers. And here you have the rendering languages that can be selected. There are more, actually, this is an outdated screenshot, sorry, and there are actually more options. For example, you can select which is the language that should be chosen first in that specific project when prompting for a new literal. So for example, if you are a lexicographer that is working on labels or a terminologist that is working on labels in Finnish for a given thesaurus, you can choose the Finnish language to be the first one in your list. And then you can also choose a filter, for example. So in this view, you can choose in any case to see only a few labels, only those you are interested in. This is particularly useful in those thesauri that have many, many labels. And also the UI itself of VocBench since the latest version that has been released, VocBench 3 version 9.0, it's multilingual UI. There is a selector here that allows you to choose the language. Currently, there is only a localization for Italian. This is because actually we only developed the feature of multilinguality. We will start working on the translation campaign very soon. So Italian is only available because most of the developing team is Italian. So while we were developing the support for the internationalization, at the same time also to make tests, we realized a localization for Italian. This is the custom forms feature I mentioned before. There is a language for specifying these forms. Actually, this language was originally meant for information extraction. Like you have an extraction template, you take this information and you transform it into RDF. But we adopted an unorthodox way to think of it. Something like, okay, what if instead of having an extraction template, we think of this information as the one that should be prompted by the user and then converted into RDF. So we used actually this template as a way to create a form in RDF. And this is what happens. For example, this is an application for the Ontolex vocabulary where there are very complex lexical expressions that can be coded in RDF. So for example, here, if we want to create a class noun, we have this template that is generated by custom forms, where we can specify the canonical form of a lexical entry, the reference to the ontology, the connection between the syntax and the semantics, and then other syntactic, morphological, and semantic properties of the elements that are involved. Another part which is very important is, Eugene, can you remind me how much, because I forgot when we started, how much time do I have?
You're probably about to run out. So we were kind of thinking maybe half an hour, and you're at 32 minutes. So maybe if you...
Okay. I thought I started a little later than 2:30. Okay, fine. I will close very soon. This is role-based access control. VocBench, like I said, it's a collaboration system, so it's important to allow different users to work cooperatively on the same data sets. At the same time, it is important to guarantee that unauthorized users cannot access other data sets, but only those that have been subscribed to. And it's important also to have a separation of concerns. Like I said before, if you are a terminologist, maybe you want to think only about concepts and their translation. If you're a lexicographer, maybe you want to care only about the lexical aspects and so on. So there are some roles which are defined within VocBench that allow for different capabilities that can be given to different users. Indeed, this is, I call it role-based access control because this acronym RBAC, it's very common in this kind of collaborative applications. But VocBench has a much finer grain. What VocBench does is not to establish roles with different actions. Indeed, each action is described by a set of capabilities that is required to be possessed by a user in order to invoke that service. Translated into VocBench, it means to perform that action on the user interface. So a role is only a collection of capabilities. This way, you can create new roles by simply collecting different capabilities, maybe coming from other roles that are here, so that you can create your own specific role. Or trivially, you can even just assign more roles to a user. In that case, the capabilities given to the user will be the union of all the capabilities coming from the 2 or more roles that are assigned to them. And there is also an editor for these capabilities so that you can go very much into the details of this thing. This is a wizard for this editor. You can specify the area of interest, the specific subject. There is a manual where these subjects are listed, and then the kind of action that you can perform, like create, read, update, delete, or validate. So I think I've run out, and we will talk another time about the extensions in VocBench. I think that this closes everything about the core features that the system has, and I'm leaving the floor to Phil.
Thanks, Armando. Thanks a lot. Let me put my camera on. So I guess, Phil, let me maybe share my screen very quickly and just briefly talk about what sort of we're doing. Yep. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Right. So I think the next thing that we actually want to do, so we wanted Phil to take all of the participants through some almost like a follow-on follow-through hands-on exercise, if you want. So we've just distributed usernames and passwords in the Zoom chat to everybody. So we created this instance for everyone to use. So you can change passwords if you want. There are no personal details that we use. So that's why we decided to not do the self-registration, etc. But so these are kind of randomly generated, pre-created usernames, passwords. Change them if you want. The instance will stay on for about 3 months while we're running these workshop series. All the data, as the slide says, is encrypted. So if you decide to use your own vocabulary, you're free to do so. And I think I'll hand it over to Phil, who will talk us through, I guess, the logistics of creating your own vocabulary and navigating and searching and all the rest of it. So Phil, over to you then.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, actually, before you proceed, so I promised to look after Q&A, and I think there was one question, but I think it's, well, there were 2 questions. One from Mauro Bertani about VocBench and GitHub, and I think we were sort of chatting in the background. That's probably an offline question that we can take separately. But there was another one about, and I cannot see the chat, if you just bear with me. So one was about the forms, and I think it was a question for Armando, probably. I don't think I'm well placed to answer it. Let me just.
But you prefer me to reply later to these questions and let Phil go, or go now?
I'm trying to find the question, and I think it was from Miel van der Sande. If I recall correctly.
Is there a reason you didn't use Shackle dash extension by top raid?
That's the one. Yeah.
Okay, one moment. Is there a reason you didn't go?
It's in the chat.
For the form generation. Well, actually, we had already this system in place, and the idea was to have a system that is totally oriented towards creation. We are using another language that we developed at the time, and we were thinking about creating a working group, a community group for making it a sort of, well, not a standard recommendation within W3C. And the main difference is that Shackle is for validation, let's say for constraint checking, while this language is specific for creation. However, there are surely connections in between the two things, because clearly if you have constraints that you want to respect, this can drive obviously the information that is necessary for creating those elements. So what we created in VocBench is a way to exploit shackle constraints in order to automatically create a skeleton in Perl. This skeleton, in many cases, can even be a completely working template for actually generating the forms. So we are not using technically the same technology, also because it depends, on the code that is written. If I'm not wrong, at least at the time it was, Top Braid used Gina. We are using RDF for J, so a different middleware. So, it's not always that easy to just move one technology from one thing to one another. Besides the fact that I don't know if it's open source, that one from Top Braid. In any case, we are using Shackle for the automatic generation of forms. So the native language is another one, this Perl, but at the same time, we can take a Shackle graph and use it to power the automatic generation of custom forms. So you don't need to write them from scratch, but these can be generated by inspecting the constraints that are within a Shackle graph. Should I go with the one from Mauro, or?
I think we're going to have to move on to keep within time, but I think if everybody can just keep the questions coming in the Q&A, and then if Armando or Eugene, if it's a bit more technical, we can maybe follow up on it a bit later.
Yeah, I think that there was a question from Ian Piper, and I'll follow up on that, and maybe.
So in the chat, I just put the link so everybody can grab that link, and I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay. So, the way I wanted to try to work this, and this is kind of a new methodology for ISCO on doing live demonstrations and workshops, is I wanted to use the raise hand quite a bit. So if everybody could, is everybody able to go to that URL that I put in the chat and that was put in the chat earlier? And if you could just raise your hand when you get to this page and that you have logged on. Fantastic. We got 10, 11, and it's counting. Then what I'll do when we get up to a good majority, I want to just wait for everybody, because what we're going to do is we're just going to take this really slowly. We're not going to be covering a lot in this particular workshop, because Armando, kind enough, has gone through kind of the big picture of VocBench. And just to give you a bit of background why people are logging on, I'm an amateur at using this software. And when I first started using it, I didn't know what SCOS was. And I've written some very silly questions in the VocBench chat, and Armando and others have been very helpful. So I would recommend using the forum. And Armando, if you could just put that up in the chat for everybody so they have that for a reference. But that Google Groups is very helpful, and I belong to the user one, not the developer one. And you can ask some silly questions. How do you do this? I can't find this in the manual, and so forth and so on. And people will come back to you. There's quite a lot of people using this software at different levels. Me, still at entry level. I've been kind of working through, oh, we went from 620. Can everybody raise their hand that have logged in? And then I'll lower everybody's hand in a minute. Sorry, I just want to give everybody an opportunity to go to the URL and get logged in. It's another way to kind of do these workshops. And I want to just thank Eugene now for spending quite a bit of time in the last couple of weeks setting up this, what he calls an instance, so a virtual server that is sitting that we're all able to log into and use. Okay, so we've got about 20. Is anybody having any trouble logging in? Maybe they could just throw that in the chat.
See a message from Discord Technologies, unable to log in, what user ID to be used, but it's the one, I suppose it's the same one for everybody that the Eugene gave before. I will repaste it again.
Yeah,
it's not the same for everyone, but I just forwarded the unique username and password. It's unique. So the spaces that you're using are entirely yours. You have unique username and password each.
okay. All right, I'll just give D Square Tech a second to log in, and then we'll slowly go forward. And as fantastic. So what we're going to do is we're just going to follow along, and Eugene and Armando, just jump in if I'm misleading people, please. So what I'll do is I've logged in as workshop user, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go change project. So if everybody could click that. Now there will be a bit of a lag here, so don't worry, it will just hold like this. And I believe it's around about 8 to 10 seconds. Use the generic login. I'm not sure what's happening with that.
I can take that on. I'll answer the question too.
Okay. So there will be a list of vocabularies and ontologies here. Okay. So what I'm going to just do is I'm just going to lower everybody's hand. I thought there was a place where I could lower their hand. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on this SDG and then click Access. And then we're going to go over to Data. Now, when you open a vocabulary in VocBench, normally it comes up with this little yellow triangle saying no concept scheme is selected. So the next thing to do is go over to scheme. And in this particular instance, we're going to check Sustainable Development Goals taxonomy. Click that, and then we go over to concept. And as Armando was mentioning in his talk, this is the resource view. And in this particular point, we're going to go through navigation. So if you click on, what I'm going to go is everybody wants to click on the same one, and then we're just looking at the same concept. So I'm looking at the very top one, and I'll just click that. Is everybody okay to follow along? Sorry, I can't figure out how to, oh, lower all hands, there we go. So just raise your hand if you've got a question or you're stuck. I see there was a hand raised here. Let me just see what that is real quick. Oh, Eugene, you've raised your hand. You all right?
Yeah, I'll remove it.
No, I loaded it. Right. So in this view, as Armando was mentioning, there's a standard way this is formatted. And over the years, so I've been using this since 2016, and I started using it for my dissertation on linked data in the built environment. So some of the concepts later on that I'm going to create are related to construction, which may be of some interest to people on the call, maybe not. So I'm just going to quickly go through these. As we go through these workshops, we'll dig a bit deeper into them, and maybe Armando can fill us in with a bit more technical details. So the first one, always at the top, is RDF type. And then it goes SCOS concept. Now, Armando didn't mention the custom forms, but I'm not that familiar with that. So it may be something we touch on a bit later in some more of the advanced workshops. And then it talks about the scheme that it's in. So SCOS in scheme. And then we come down to the preferred labels, alternate labels, and SCOS note. And the nice thing about VocBench, so everything above here from notes up is always in the same format. Then you've got, in this particular, we've got DC subject and has target and has exact match and narrower. And then at the bottom here, which I find probably one of the most helpful properties in SCOS, is SCOS notation. I use this to create a way for a document management system to be able to label file names. So this is a local. So if I go to schema, so this one is STW for economics. And if I go to concept, now this is set up a bit differently than the way I've set up BuildVoc, where it uses 2 tiers. So it's got general descriptors, and then it's got what they call THSYS. And they use those as vocabularies. Is the other one up? No. So if I click on, if I click that one, as we just talked about, it kind of has the standard format here. And then if you click on the little arrow, it'll bring down the narrowers. And these are still in, they've got an RDF type of THSYS. And then if you click down one more time, it will bring up, so this is bringing up in German and English, business economics, sorry. Right, so if I just bring up my notes here for a second. So we've kind of looked at very quickly the properties. So the next bit I wanted to show, is this still thinking? Okay.
I think it is back.
Okay, I'm just gonna see if it can come back up.
But yeah,
so people can follow along.
List of projects is still taking time by the looks of it.
Okay. Is it just me, or is it?
I think no, it's not you. It's
okay. All right, good. I didn't know if the kids were gaming too much this afternoon. Right. Right. Is there any questions we can answer while I'm waiting? I haven't kept up with the chat.
No, I think most of the questions were just around access.
Okay. Eugene has been doing some testing on this, so, and he has bumped up the server quite a bit to take this kind of traffic, but.
Well, clearly it didn't work, but that's fine. So
that's
I think
fine.
maybe so. Let's do this. I think for
well,
this
what I was going to do,
workshop-
should I just go back to my local?
Yeah. So if
so.
Well, we wanted this to last about an hour and 15, so let's.
Yeah, so what I was going to do next is I was just going to talk about search. So before I, and what I'll do is let me just zoom in a bit so everybody can see. So on the search down here, the first thing I normally do when I start up a new project is I'll click this, and so you can go starts with, contains, ends with, or what have you. But the nice bit is on this particular application is you can just restrict it to a certain language. So for example, if I wanted to do American, I'll just do all those three English, but then you click OK. And I always, personally, I always type this enable auto completion during typing because I find it quite helpful. And then if you just click OK, and so, for example, if I start typing in business, you can kind of see that it will pick up. Now I've just done it starts with, so it's got everything with business. And then if I just went, well, climate, because we were going to talk about climate. And so we've got three different options. So if I click on one of those now, business climate, it will come down, it will go right to that concept. And that's quite handy. So the next thing I was going to show was, so if we go over here to projects, and then we go create, and I'm just going to go fire safety, and I'll just use and here's where you check, you select the model, and I'm just doing SCOS. I'm not going to do any of the history, and we'll talk about this, I believe, in the next workshop. Is that right, Eugene?
It's the third one, I think, that we want to do.
The third one, we talk about validation and histories and what have you. Oh, next one we're going to do is importing, isn't it? So project has been created successfully. And now if I just close this little button here, I'll go to fire safety. Now what I was going to show you is, because when Eugene and I have been working on this, it comes up with, if you go data and then scheme, and then if you add, it normally comes up with, you haven't selected a language. So what I was going to show you really quickly is if you go here and then go administration, so that was profile administration, and then you select users, and I've just used, so, oh, actually, was it? It was users, wasn't it?
Are you looking for language?
Project settings, wasn't it?
Yeah. Project groups management, possibly.
Groups management.
Yeah.
No. It was administration, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Must be for a given project for a specific user.
Okay. Go back to, so if you just click on this, create scheme, and what I've done is part B. So the last year or so, I've been working on approved document B in the UK, and that is used for a guidance document for construction industry. So the nice thing here with this system is it auto-generates a random URI. So if I click OK, and then I'll just check that, and I'll go to concept, and I'll create a concept. Now it's going to ask me for the preferred label. I'm just going to use building, and I'll leave that blank, and I'll click OK. And that is what I was going to show today, because I didn't want to take up too much time. And that was a very brief introduction to creating a scheme and a concept. Do we have any questions? Eugene, you there?
I'm here. I don't believe there are any questions. I mean, there was some about sort of install and some around configuration, but I think these can be answered offline, perhaps.
Okay.
I can give. I replied about the Docker question. I see there is another question in the chat that is about if the existing projects can be used. Absolutely, yes. Every time we develop a new version, we release a new version, we provide actually some update routines for the data folder of VocBench. So what you do with the VocBench installation is that you simply remove the old one and you install the new one. That you install, I mean, you just unzip the file and run the new one. The directory that doesn't need to be changed is the one that is created automatically by VocBench the first time that it is started, that is Semantic Architect. That directory will be always compliant with the version that you have. So if there is no change from one version of VocBench to the new one, the directory will be simply left as is and it will be compatible. Instead, if there are some changes at the level of the data, the new VocBench version will compare the version that is stored within itself with a version that is recorded in the data directory. If there are some update routines that are stored in all the versions that are in between, they will be activated the first time, and then once the modifications on the Semantic Architect folder will be completed, then the version number also of the data folder will be updated as well. So they will not need to be run anymore. So basically, you can always keep the data folder every time. If you have sensible data, if you have very important projects, whatever, obviously, every time you move to a new VocBench version, I recommend to do a backup. This is something that goes for everything, you know, even in operative systems, you have installation points in which you can go back to the previous one. So I suggest to do a backup, because what if while the data is being updated, I don't know, your computer crashes. But besides that, there shouldn't be any problem. And then there is some question on the question answering. Well, about the installation, the specific installation that's being used for this demo, I cannot reply because it's not owned by me. But okay, so they're all about this because it's the okay. Okay, crafted my existing projects and roles. Yes, this is I reply to this. And
I think there's an interesting question in the chat, Armando, about high availability hosting of the of VocBench.
well, it depends on the yes, the last one. It depends on the kind of data that you need to host. I mean, in theory, if you are working, for instance, on it's your production environment, but it's only for a few users, and you are maintaining ontologies which are quite small, I would say you can even avoid to install a separate triple store, which is the recommended thing to do as you can see on the manual on the site. And you can just use VocBench as is, develop your ontologies with the triple store that is within VocBench, and just once in a while save them somewhere so that you can keep track of them in case anything gets lost. If you need more memory because you are going to load very big data sets, then I recommend that by first you use a separate triple store. I recommend using GraphDB, which is a very efficient triple store. It supports our reasoning if you need it to, and also has its own specific workbench for dealing with any sort of issue that you might face in case. This is just, I mean, some kind of disaster recovery. Nothing should happen. Once you have deployed everything, then it depends on the size. I mean, obviously, the size, the size in memory grows logarithmically with the size of your data store. It's not that if you have 3 gigabytes of a data set, then you need 3 gigabytes of memory. Obviously not, but at the same time, there is some initial memory requirement that could grow because both VocBench, but especially GraphDB, use a lot of memory for caching. Like I said, then if you have to load a lot of data sets, this will not grow linearly. But if you want to have a very efficient installation for large data sets, I may recommend to use 2 giga for VocBench Semantic Architect, I mean, altogether, and 6 gigabytes for GraphDB. There is a page on the manual. It's on it's the system administration manual online. I can post it very soon, a moment. And that page provides information on how to configure your server for these enlarged requests, system requirements. I'm posting the page here. Here it is. And if you go at the end of the page, there are, for example, environment variables that you can set in order to change the default memory, the starting and the maximum memory that is assigned to Java and thus affecting VocBench. And then there are specific variables for GraphDB, which is also written in Java, but these are written probably in their own starting scripts, and they are used specifically for the Java virtual machine that is used for GraphDB. I think that's all. With these settings, I mean, 6 gigabytes, I know it's not very small. I mean, it's not for a personal computer because in the end, I mean, not for all, because it's 8 gigabytes total of maximum memory. But I might say that this covers almost any kind of request that you might have. I never had to switch it up, and I'm using it even with very large data sets. Is there a purely open source DB that we can use for VocBench? As for most institutions, Autodesk DB commercial version is expensive. Well, let me say, by first, yeah, like Eugene said, you can use RDF4J. But there is also one other thing. GraphDB, it's for up to 2 query in parallel. is available for free. I understand that this is quite a limitation. It depends on the number of users that you have and the number of concurrent users that you have. In general, also a query is, I mean, it's satisfied in a fraction of a second. No, every time you click on something, you're firing a query on the GraphDB, but it will take only a fraction of a second. So if you have 2-3 users in parallel, maybe you can give it a try. Otherwise, RDF4J will behave quite well. But probably if you have large requirements, both in the number of concurrent users and the size of the datasets, I suggest to go for GraphDB with a commercial license. Anyway, try with a free one and see how it works.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm reading the last comment by Dagobert Sergel, and yeah, I had the same problem. I mean, it was very blurred image. I don't know if it was the same for others.
What was that? Sorry.
I mean, when you were sharing the screen was very blurred.
Was it? Oh.
Yeah. I didn't know if it was my problem, but I guess that I mean, from what I read from Dagobert, something that also other experience it.
Okay. We'll have to look into that.
Okay, so I guess we're probably at time. So what we're going to do next? So what we'll do is we'll send out the questionnaire, and would obviously appreciate any feedback on the session. What we'll try and do is actually recover the instance and send the message to you, so you can use it with the same username and password that you received in the chat. So take a record of that, and then we'll reconvene in a month's time and talk about data import.
Well, thank you very much.
Right. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Armando. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.